I know. Just hear me out. I think Disney Star Wars is the best Star Wars. If it helps, I'm talking about the main series films, 7, 8, and 9, hopefully. Spin-offs, well... I know, we will get all into that, but first... Hey y'all, welcome to UnScripted. In case you didn't see my last couple of videos, UnScripted is essentially a series of shallow deep dives into the tiny little bite-sized nuggets of film that I just find super interesting, that often go overlooked in discussion about general screenplay structure and building characters and plot lines and etc. But so anyway, Disney Star Wars is the best Star Wars. I get that that is a very polarizing statement, and honestly, objectively, no, they're probably not. But as the third act of this 9-part saga, along with the large fan and financial backing Lucasfilm has garnered because of how popular the series has remained over the years, these specific movies have been granted a lot of specific privileges that allow for more dynamic storytelling techniques, higher quality production value, and the opportunity to properly conclude ongoing themes in a meaningful way, which is the best thing I could imagine for some of my favorite films of all time. Yes, I'm talking about Attack the Clones. But let's just be civil. We're kind of in a lull of Star Wars season, so I think the discourse will be pretty level-headed. But this is just my opinion. I'll go ahead and share it, and then you can determine whether or not you'd agree. But as you'll come to learn, my opinion is a lot more nuanced than I let on. These films, in the broadest sense, ask the questions, how does our past influence our future, talking about legacies, and what role should the Force play in the universe, and what is the significance of that? Before we get into that, though, I feel I should be a tad objective and point out the fact that these movies have some clear flaws. And I also have some personal nitpicks that Lucasfilm might want to take into account going forward. Because everybody has something wrong with Star Wars, and I'll be darned if I can't say mine. So issue number 1. These are the least Star Wars-y films, visually speaking. So this is definitely the least significant issue when discussing the larger scope of the Star Wars saga, because I traditionally am a writer. I don't really focus as much on cinematography, acting, and the like, but it brings up an interesting point. A big part of Star Wars lies in the weird space creatures and unique places they visit. Up until now, we had city planets, desert worlds, ripe with disgusting creatures that were breakthroughs in the world of practical effects. We had lush paradises, expansive forests, snowy, desolate hellscapes that aided the feeling of claustrophobia and the pressures our heroes were facing. Say what you will about the prequels, but the worlds they created, even with the overuse of CGI, allowed for a unique look at the unique time in Star Wars canon, to make it visually distinct from everything else, as well as show places and people that couldn't be shown before. Now with the new movies, there seems to be an over-reliance on the opposite end of the spectrum, with 7 and 8 investing so much time into building real sets that do feel more real, but in an effort to just shoot on places they are, such as Luke's Island, Crate, etc., they sacrifice the opportunities to create worlds that feel lived in. There's nothing truly visually distinct about these places, nothing that genuinely impacts the plot or the characters. And for the sake of nostalgia and preserving the legacy, the Resistance and the First Order hardly made any remarkable upgrades to their fleets in the 30 years between movies. I guess this could be excused under the assumption that they didn't need to, because it was a time of peace. But seriously, that just feels shamelessly lazy and unoriginal. Creatures like Rancors, Wampas, Sarlaccs, Tusken Raiders, and the like were also unique, and their designs made the Star Wars universe feel so much bigger. And they also started to impact our heroes and force them to face conflict. Just putting a weird-looking alien in front of the camera isn't going to leave the same impact as it did back in 1977, because we've seen that done before. And with the newer monsters, we never get a good look at them because of the quick cuts, fast pacing, low lighting, etc. We can't get attached to something and make it iconic if we don't ever get a good look at it. So to close, that weird opera alien on Canto Bight, those pretty much horses, those crystal foxes, even the likes of like Rathars and, dare I say it, porgs. Don't cut it. Also, seriously, I know it's been memed to death, but why is there a squid monster in every single Star Wars movie? Hashtag where are the Wampas? Hashtag stop squidding up Star Wars. It's gross. It's so gross. Even if you hated 8, you gotta commend Rian Johnson for saying no to including the obligatory squid monster scene. Okay, nitpick number 2. The jokes, quote unquote, are not the best, but okay. I knew going into these movies there were going to be a lot of jokes. It's Disney. And seriously, I know people get super serious about Star Wars, but the saga has always been a little bit campy. The only problem I have with jokes is when it conflicts with the tone of the scene, or the characters, motivations, and personality. I see the moment that Luke Skywalker throws his old lightsaber over the cliff not only to be funny from a general audience perspective, the action really proves a point that he doesn't care about it as much as we would. It lends a lot more to his character than initially let on. Same goes for when he tickles Rey's hand during the Force meditation scene, or post-quip at the beginning of 7 when he's captured by Kylo Ren. You know, who talks first, you talk first, I talk first. That's funny. What doesn't go over well is scenes where the impact is cut short by cutting to something that's tonally inconsistent and doesn't have any purpose other than to tell a cheap joke. There's a great video by a great channel called The Closer Look that elaborates a lot more to this point. I'll link it down below. I really enjoy it, even though I disagree to the level that the comedy is misused. Personally, I don't feel as though the comedy overshadows the themes and the character development, but let's move on to some genuine complaints I have with the new films. So, real complaint numero uno, the bigger story of 7 is incoherent, making me lose some engagement. I don't mean the actual plot of 7 that we see on screen. I mean the larger roles of the Galactic Republic, the First Order, and the Resistance. Some would classify it as just rushed world building. I would consider it more of a larger stakes kind of background, kind of deep-rooted motivation. Kind of like how I talked about in my last video about Endgame and Nebula, linked right here. So the First Order is not the ruling force in the galaxy, the overseeing power that dictates everything. That's the Galactic Republic, presumably the power that rose up after the Empire was destroyed. From the looks of it, the First Order is a new regime, either sprouted from the leftover Imperials, like the cells of the Nazis that were hiding after World War II, or they're possibly inspired by the methodology of the Empire. But so, what does that make the Resistance? Are they part of the Galactic Republic? Are they some smaller insurgency dedicated to wiping out what remains of the Empire? Where does their belief take root? Where does their passion take root? Do they care about the Galactic Republic being blown up because it was a stable government? Or do they care because it's some of their brothers and sisters whom they've dedicated to serving their lives for? That stuff kind of matters, but not all that much. Maybe a little bit. I know it bogged the movie down, but give us something. Regardless, it's not really clear, and it's made even muddier once the First Order wipe out the Galactic Republic. Does that mean that they now assume the role of the galaxy's governing force? How will they enforce this? We weren't given that much of a time jump between 7 and 8, and so unless there's a big time jump in 9, we're not going to be able to see these kind of larger ramifications. It's narrowing down the story to focus on the essentials, which I appreciate, such as characters and relationships and smaller world building, more niche. But when you're dealing with a universe that is like 50 years old and is expansive as Star Wars is, it doesn't seem like enough, you know? I'm sure this was made clear in a book or something, like a tie-in or a novelization, but I shouldn't need some sort of retcon device to understand something in the film. I get brand synergy and all, but that's just lazy storytelling. And it makes it very difficult to get super invested in a fight when I don't know who's fighting for what. Genuine complaint number 2. The revolving door of directors aren't cooperating, they're clashing. Look, I like a lot of Rian Johnson's films. I like J.J. Abrams as, like, a guy. Now I'll get into my thoughts on 7 later, but to summarize them, I really like the direction J.J. was headed. Sure, it was nothing super original, but it left a lot of room open for the future of the franchise. Then Rian Johnson came on to direct 8, and took the film in an entirely new direction, practically discarding all of JJ's setup. And what did I think? Johnson made one of the most original, daring, engaging films I've seen in a long time. He answered the questions that mattered to his story, but not in a way that fit my theories. He did it in a way that elevated his story and his themes to new heights, and left a lot of now far more interesting threads to be resolved in 9. However, with JJ coming back on board, I feel as though he may be tempted to turn the series yet again to conclude on his terms, not delivering on the impactful themes and marinating on these huge overarching storylines because of his fast pacing. This is probably one of the biggest reasons why fans of 7 are so disappointed by 8, and why some people loathe 7 in the first place. If that issue doesn't hold a candle to my last point, Genuine complaint number 3, L3 is a disgusting addition to canon and is everything wrong with the new movies. Okay, I get that it's whatever you can classify a robot as, isn't part of the core trilogy, but the way Solo handled L3 is a lot like how 8 handled the Finn and Rose subplot with the animal cruelty theme. Not only did this entire motivation contradict, or rather seem out of place with the rest of the engaging plot, but it made the film feel more like a newsreel than an actual film. Real-world social commentary should not fuel a Star Wars plot if it's done so explicitly. Without any nuance, the themes of these new films become overly preachy, and Star Wars was never about being preachy. But anyway, now that that's out of the way, I wanted to stand up on my pedestal for just a few minutes and clear up some misconceptions, mainly about the characters and some particular story elements. So maybe you can see where I'm coming from when I reach my big thesis statement. So, rebuttal number 1, oh boy, this is gonna go well. The characters are whiny, overpowered, or different than I remember. Yeah, on the surface, the character of Rey is a bit of a blank slate. A couple common complaints are that she's just a means of spouting exposition and themes at, and she's just too strong, and wouldn't stand a chance against someone like Kylo Ren. But she has a clear goal of wanting to leave Jakku and find her place in a larger world, and the conflict with being tied down with the quest for her parents adds some layers to her, especially when Kylo Ren reveals her parents were nobodies in 8, and strongly implying that he believes the Force is exclusive to the Jedi and Sith dynasties, really making her struggle that much more significant to the overarching saga. Her natural proficiency at fighting seems a bit convenient at first, but her years of scavenging and fending for herself on a planet full of thugs and raiders provide the most blatant explanation without ever talking down to the audience. Not to mention Rey's connection to the Force fills her with the extra power and focus, allowing her to hone in her skills to be more precise. This makes her the perfect physical and ideological counterpart to Kylo Ren. The problem that a lot of fans have with him, and more broadly the entire First Order, is that he's not intimidating, that his emotions override his ability to confidently command an army, and that he's just a discount Darth Vader. Duh. That's kind of the whole point. But put a pin in that though, we're getting back to that. But for now, let's just focus on why Kylo's weakness makes him a far more compelling villain. And it's all because of Vader. Kylo comes from a dynasty of strong Force users, people literally destined for greatness. Because of this, he treats his power like it's his birthright, and that he should innately have mastery over it. And when he relies on his legacy, and instead of honing his own skills, he fails. Although he sort of seems just sort of a conniving bad guy on the surface, that is really a crux, a moment of change for Kylo Ren. And as part 1 of a 3-film trilogy, it really sort of hits the nail on the head as being the first plot point of the larger story, the point of no return. This is the moment, the crux, from which Kylo Ren changes everything. He believes his standing makes him inherently stronger and more honed than someone like Rey, which is the complete opposition to what Luke says about the nature of the Force. He says, the light side doesn't belong to the Jedi, it penetrates everything in the universe. That's pretty on the nose. So in 8, when Kylo Ren murders Snoke and assumes the role of Supreme Leader, which I love, put another pin in that Snoke thing, by the way, he does it purely on the basis that he believes that he is entitled to rule under no one, because of all of that untamed potential talk he's been receiving since he was born. He stands on the shoulders of giants, but believes that he can and he should stand alone. And in the moments that he tries to accomplish this, his inner conflict is most apparent. He begins to doubt the validity of Snoke's teachings, reconsidering what living up to a legacy truly means for him. Be selfish and lonely with his power, such as him wishing to eradicate the Jedi, or let the Force belong to everyone, not just the Jedi or the Sith. The redemption path for Ren is laid out clear as day, but the place that he fights to be at by the end of 8 leaves a lot more options open for him to take. And just to hammer home Kylo's motivations, look at his helmet. His entire garb is one big facade. When he takes it off in 7, it truly shows how he is just a regular man posturing as this almighty villain. Deep down, he knows he's not the next Darth Vader, hiding behind that mask. However, when he destroys the mask in 8, he finally tries to stand on his own merit. Regardless, his isolation makes him rash, more violent, and less emotionally tied to his family, thinking that this will get him to where he wants to be. However, as we see, it only makes him weaker, because To quote Blind Sticky Guy from Rogue One, if all is as the Force wills it, and if the Force wills a diffusion of power, an interplay of the light and dark side within a being, then Kylo Ren is destined to fail.
Unless he follows that redemption arc, which they are clearly setting up.
I mean, like Snoke said, weakness, properly manipulated, can be a sharp tool. Nobody ever said Star Wars was subtle, but that doesn't mean that I still can't enjoy it and that it's not well written. Bringing back those giants, let's talk about the OGs, Luke and Leia and Han. Remember how I pointed out that these movies are the third act of a larger saga? Well, what would it be like if these characters that we grew up loving started out the same, and we pick up with them in the climax of the saga where the entire fate of the Jedi, Sith, and the entire understanding of the Force is in peril? What if these super influential characters never changed? What if Luke was never tempted by the dark side again? Or never changed his mind on what the Force's role in the universe was? What if Han never had a kid? What if Leia never showed that she could tap into the Force? These traits add new dimensions to our established heroes, giving them a purpose in the story. They teach the new generation new things that would have drastically changed not only their physical journey, but also their emotional journey. Kind of like that Endgame video with Nebula, yeah. Funny thing, how things just kind of... Their growth is a natural progression, considering where we left off, and they don't need to play these super big roles, but instead need to just serve the overarching story of legacy. Oh yeah, put a pin in that too, the legacy thing. Let's talk briefly about other ways these new films subvert our expectations and preconceived notions. Not in the way that people are complaining that Rian Johnson did. I'm talking from a general screenwriting story perspective. Finn is our first look into the psyche of a stormtrooper, giving more insight into the more meticulous workings of the Empire and the Empire 2.0, how they value unity over identity, and what that can do to someone. Essentially make them distrusting of joining any large faction and fighting for a cause that's not their own. Such as DJ saying, live free, don't join. Huh. I guess that whole thing was pretty important to the plot after all. Poe and Holdo blur the lines of what is objectively right and wrong within the hero side, adding some more intrigue to whatever they're doing. Poe is valiant to a fault, and he must learn that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. I'm not sorry. Anyway, Holdo, like Leia, is weary from the losses of war, especially considering that they are both now leading a whole army. That's going to make them untrusting, standoffish. It makes them seem more like human beings rather than characters in a movie, moving the plot along. Let's see, who else? BB-8 is the cutest money machine in history. Rose is there. Hux is the opposite end of the spectrum as Leia and Holdo. He feels incapable of handling his army because he knows he's in the shadow of the Empire. He acts like a child because he is one, and Snoke is the same. He hides behind the facade of the cool and calculated Emperor, but in moments of genuine rage, he can't help but scream at Kylo Ren or shoot Force lightning willy-nilly. He and Hux are a means to an end. They are what Kylo Ren aspires to be, all-powerful. Their weaknesses are what allow him to surpass them, and their arrogance is what shaped him into that sort of birthright legend, one man is an island guy we see in the films. But we'll talk more about that when we pull out the First Order pin. Oh, and I love R2-D2, C-3PO, and Chewie just as much as anybody, but seriously, why is everybody complaining that they didn't get their own fully fleshed out arcs? Was that really the missing key from the original trilogy? Alright, rebuttal number 2. The Force Awakens isn't original, and The Last Jedi is a good movie, but not a good Star Wars movie. Oh boy, this is gonna be fun. Okay, so by far the biggest complaint anybody had with 7 when it was released was that Disney could have done anything with the story, but they just remade Episode 4. And yeah, they borrowed heavily from it, but it was probably the safest bet Disney could have made to pander to the most people and really justify their $4 billion purchase. However, they also used this tactic to their advantage, subverting established tropes, i.e. Pulling back the curtain on the obligatory villainous character and portraying him as a conflicted person right off the bat, or a Jedi that doesn't want to be a Jedi, or visiting familiar-looking planets but with a twist, like the Imperial wreckage on Jakku. 8 took everything right about 7 and turned it up to 11. The biggest complaint with the film is that it, quote, spits in the face of everything Star Wars and it destroys canon, which, come on. I've already gushed about how the characters and themes are a natural and much needed evolution to what we've seen before, It's not a good Star Wars movie. It's a great one. Sorry. Anyway, I could go on forever about how Finn and Rose's side story was such a powerful method of highlighting that there's always a truth behind the glossy exterior, despite the kind of shoddy execution, and how it shows how communication, like in the instance with Poe and Holdo, can lead to failure, and they inadvertently made the situation so much worse than if they had just been open with each other, or how the Broom Kid and his story, a hope existing elsewhere in the universe, perfectly ties together the theme of the movie, or maybe I'll just move on to pulling out those pins. Which, I'm sorry, but that's gonna have to be another video. I know, but I really wanna get this sort of out on schedule, and if I edit it into one part, it's definitely gonna just hold me back, and I really wanna get this out there before a new trailer drops, or anything like that, and everything I say is completely negated or whatever. But also, I just wanna keep everybody engaged, and start a discourse in the comments, and hopefully try and sort of address some of the things that people are saying in the next video. I know this video was a lot of setup, but so was episode 7. Next video, I promise we're gonna be a lot more analytical and dive a lot deeper into the themes and how that can help us as a community of writers. Also, there's a little thunderstorm brewing, so I'm gonna go find my safe space. I like my videos to be shorter and more concise, kind of to the point, not super analytical. Consider this as sort of a passion project that I've just been wanting to make for years, and now I have a platform. Very tiny, very thin platform that could break at any minute, but it's a platform. All right, guys, thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe and ring that bell to get notified when the next part comes out. Bye.